picture this. You just spent $500,000 replatforming your enterprise e-commerce site.
A very stressful day.
Right? It's launch day. The site is live. The pages load incredibly fast. The design is just flawless. And then your organic traffic just completely flatlines. Zero sales.
The absolute worst case scenario.
It really is. And why? Because your migration team is a single tiny spreadsheet of 301 redirects, and Google essentially just lost the address to your store.
Yeah, which happens way more often than you'd think at the enterprise level.
So today we are tearing down a masterclass execution guide on moving from Salesforce Commerce Cloud over to Shopify so that nightmare scenario doesn't happen to you.
Because, I mean, a migration of this scale, it isn't just an IT project you run in the background.
Really?
It is a fundamental rewiring of your entire revenue engine while, the car is still driving down the highway. The margin for error is incredibly thin.
Which is exactly why you need a clear roadmap. And that's what we have in front of us today with this deep dive. But before we even get into the nuts and bolts of data paths and SEO preservation, we really have to untangle the naming web.
Oh, yeah. The alphabet soup.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because if you are researching this move, you are going to hit this massive wall of contradictory terminology.
Right.
It makes it sound like you're dealing with 5 different platforms.
The terminology is a huge hurdle for teams just trying to build a basic project plan. The platform you're leaving, Salesforce Commerce Cloud, or SFCC, it goes by several different names depending on who you ask in your company, or honestly just how old the documentation is that you're reading.
Seriously.
Originally, this platform was known as Demandware, which Salesforce bought back in 2016, I think. But search volume across developer forums is still heavily indexed under Demandware.
Old habits definitely die hard in the tech world.
They really do. Today, Salesforce markets the enterprise suite as Agentforce Commerce. But if your developers look at the actual technical docs they need to do their jobs, Salesforce still calls the backend B2C commerce.
Okay, so Demandware, Agentforce Commerce, B2C Commerce.
Right, and then on the storefront architecture side, like the part the customer actually sees.
Yeah.
You might hear your engineering team throw around terms like SFRA, which stands for Storefront Reference Architecture. Or they might say composable storefront, or even PWA kit.
It is a total nightmare to keep straight. But for the sake of this deep dive and, for your own sanity as you plan this move, we are treating all of those names as the exact same source platform.
Because mechanically they are.
Exactly. Whether your contract says Demandware or Agentforce Commerce, the underlying reality of how you extract your data remains exactly the same.
The mechanics apply across the board.
So our mission for this deep dive is to extract the reality of what actually maps cleanly from SFCC to Shopify, what absolutely must be rebuilt from scratch, how to protect your search equity, and how to execute that final cutover.
It's a lot to cover.
It is. Okay, so let's unpack this, starting with what I like to call the great illusion of replatforming.
Ah, right. The misconception of how data and logic actually behave when you move between these two specific architectures.
Because the instinct, when you hear the word migration, is to picture it like moving files on a hard drive.
Just dragging and dropping.
Yeah, exactly. You assume you're just going to export this massive database of rows and columns from SFCC, hit an import button on Shopify, and boom, your store is live.
Yeah.
We need to shatter that illusion immediately, like before you even start budgeting for this project.
We really do. Because moving from SFCC to Shopify is not a transfer at all. It is a fundamental rebuild of your business logic.
A complete rebuild.
Yes. SFCC stores are built using proprietary, heavily customized cartridges. A cartridge is basically SFCC's way of packaging custom code, data, and third-party integrations all together.
Right.
And they also rely really heavily on specific SFRA controllers and rigid pipelines just to execute your store's daily logic.
And when you look for the equivalent of a cartridge or a pipeline over on Shopify, you find
absolutely nothing.
Nothing.
Nothing at all. Shopify splits logic up based on what it physically does, rather than packing it all into cartridges. So your discount rules, your shipping calculations, cart validation, those become what are called Shopify functions.
Okay, functions.
Right. And the actual visual storefront behavior becomes theme code or apps. And those scheduled back-office jobs that run every night on SFCC, those turn into webhook-driven services interacting with Shopify's APIs.
Think of it like moving to a new country. You're packing up your entire house, but when you get to the new country, the electrical grid is completely different.
That's a great way to put it.
The voltage is different. The wall outlets are literally a different shape. You can't just plug your old SFCC toaster into a Shopify wall outlet and expect it to turn on.
No, it would fry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You have to essentially rebuild your appliance ecosystem to match the new electrical grid.
That is the perfect visualization. And that logic applies to almost everything that makes your storefront unique today. Those custom Einstein product recommendations you spent months tuning,
Oh yeah, those are gone.
totally gone. They do not port over. You have to set them up fresh using Shopify's native search and discovery tools or bring in a dedicated app. Complex promotion rules have to be completely reauthored.
Yeah.
Your entire customized checkout flow has to be rebuilt through Shopify checkout extensibility.
So we are literally telling you that you have to rebuild the very DNA of your storefront's logic. I mean, that sounds incredibly daunting for an e-commerce director to pitch to their board.
It is a really heavy lift up front. There's no denying that at all. But what's fascinating here is what happens after that initial rebuild. Because you are migrating to a platform that handles the vast majority of that complex infrastructure natively, right? So your engineering team's day-to-day reality completely shifts.
How so?
Well, the execution guide highlights this quote from Chris Coca. He's the chief digital officer at Bauer. He points out that with Shopify, they receive an enormous amount of functionality just out of the box.
Right. I remember he mentions a huge pipeline of new features that just drop regularly without his team having to actually build them from scratch.
Exactly. By shedding all those bespoke custom cartridges that required, constant upkeep and security patching, Bauer's engineering teams could actually stop spending their sprints just maintaining basic e-commerce functionality.
They could actually do new things.
Yes. They were finally freed up to focus on high-value areas, things that actually drive revenue for the brand, like advanced content creation or building out complex customer loyalty programs.
So you're trading a complex custom grid that requires constant maintenance for a standardized one that largely runs itself. So the house is built on a new grid. The logic is rewired. But a house is basically useless without the furniture inside it. Which brings us to the actual data migration. The catalog, the customers, the orders.
Right. And this is the phase where we actually are talking about moving massive amounts of rows and columns. But the tool you use to move that furniture matters immensely.
Right, because the guide explicitly warns that Shopify's own official store migration app does not support Salesforce Commerce Cloud.
It does not.
If you are a project manager and you're looking for a shiny native Shopify button that says import from SFCC, you just need to stop looking.
Yeah, it doesn't exist. You have to utilize third-party data paths. The guide details two primary routes for this. First is a tool called Let Extension, which offers a native automated migration specifically built for extracting products, customers, and orders from SFCC.
And the second option.
The alternative is Matrixify, which is incredibly powerful but generic. Matrixify has no native SFCC connector, meaning your team has to export your SFCC data, which is often in these really messy XML formats.
Oh, XML is fun.
Yeah, and then map it manually to Matrixify's strict CSV spreadsheet formats before you can import anything.
Got it. Now, regarding the product data itself, there is some serious misinformation out there about platform limits that we really need to clear up for everyone.
Oh, the variant limits, yes.
Right, because if you read Lit Extension's own documentation on migrating from SFCC, they claim Shopify restricts you to a maximum of 99 variants and 3 options per product.
Which is entirely outdated. You really have to trust Shopify's actual engineering limits, not a third-party tool's legacy documentation.
Exactly.
Shopify significantly upgraded their back-end architecture recently. The real limit is now up to 2,048 variants and 3 options per product.
2,048.
Yeah.
And that is a massive difference, especially if you are an enterprise fashion brand dealing with huge size and color matrices, or, a B2B brand with complex material variation.
It changes the whole game for those catalogs.
Totally. But while those 2,000 variants will migrate smoothly, there is a specific piece of customer data that is going to cause some serious friction on launch day.
The passwords.
Yep. The execution guide states unequivocally that customer passwords never transfer.
Never.
I have to push back on this, though. If I'm an e-commerce director, my very first thought is, wait, doesn't forcing hundreds of thousands of loyal customers to reset their passwords on launch day just completely ruin the user experience?
It's scary.
Doesn't that kill our conversion rate right out of the gate?
It is a completely valid concern, and yes, you will see a temporary dip in login rates. But you cannot bypass the mechanics of modern cryptography.
Meaning they're encrypted.
Right. SFCC doesn't actually know your customers' passwords. They only hold a mathematically scrambled hash of the password. Because you physically cannot unscramble a one-way hash, There is no plain text password to export.
Ah.
No tool on earth can migrate them.
Okay, so it's not a limitation of Shopify. It's literally just basic data security.
Exactly. So the operational fix here is all about communication and strategic timing. You don't just launch the new site and wait for confused customers to fail at the login screen.
Right, that would be a disaster.
You plan a highly strategic launch day account invite email campaign. You frame the password reset around the exciting new storefront experience you've just built.
Make it a positive thing.
Yeah, and the crucial detail is that because you did migrate the customer records using Let Extension or Matrixify, their entire historical order data stays attached to their profile.
That's huge.
It is. Once they click that invite email and set a new password, their account feels perfectly continuous.
So you frame it as an exclusive upgrade, not a technical glitch. Now, speaking of that historical data, there's another major point of confusion the guide clears up, and it's regarding Shopify's Order API. There is this persistent rumor on developer forums that Shopify only allows you to import 60 days of historical orders.
Yes, the infamous 60-day limit. This is a classic misinterpretation of how APIs function to protect server load.
Okay, break that down for us.
Sure. By default, when you query Shopify's Order API to read data, it only returns the last 60 days of orders.
Just to read.
Right. It does this to save processing power, so a random query doesn't accidentally pull 5 years of enterprise order data and crash a service. It is simply a read default.
Okay, so it's a safety filter on reading data, not a hard cap on what you can actually store in the database.
Exactly. Your migration tool or your custom ETL process?
Let me jump in there real quick. ETL, meaning extract, transform, load. That's basically the custom scripts your data engineering team writes to pull the data from Salesforce, format it, and push it into Shopify, right?
Precisely. That ETL process can absolutely backfill orders from 3, 5, or even 10 years ago as historical records. The data will live safely in Shopify's database, fully attached to the customer's fresh login.
Okay, so we've rebuilt the underlying logic, we've extracted the data, and the customer history is totally intact. But all of that data is completely useless if the customer physically cannot reach the site because Google lost the address.
Yeah, if they can't find you, you can't sell to them.
Exactly. That brings us to the single most critical phase of the project for maintaining your baseline revenue, protecting your digital real estate.
We are talking about the 301 mandate. The friction here really stems from how the two platforms treat URL taxonomy. I mean, we all know what a 301 redirect is, right?
It's a permanent forwarding address.
Right. Telling a browser or a search engine that a page has moved. But the challenge here is the architectural difference. SFCC is highly customizable when it comes to URLs. It allows you to build custom directory trees, shape your storefront routing, and design category paths almost any way you want.
But Shopify operates on Rails. It uses very strict fixed paths that you literally cannot change.
Yep. Every single product URL on your new site is forced to sit under the /products/directory, followed by the product handle. Every collection sits under /collections/.
So rigid.
Because of this rigid taxonomy, almost none of your old SFCC URLs will survive the migration unchanged. The structure is just fundamentally different.
Which is why the source explicitly calls skipping the 301 redirect map the costliest mistake a brand can make.
It's fatal.
They note that enterprise migrations that suffer massive traffic drops almost always skipped or botched this specific spreadsheet. And capacity really isn't the issue here because Shopify allows up to 100,000 URL redirects on standard plans and a massive 20 million on Shopify Plus.
Yeah, so meticulous mapping is the issue. Your SEO team has to map every single old SFCC custom URL to its new fixed Shopify destination.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Because you can't just redirect anything you want to anywhere you want. Shopify actually has rules.
It's very strict rules. They enforce reserved paths at the server level.
Right. The guide lists several URLs you cannot redirect. If the URL begins with /app, /cart, /orders, or /shop, Shopify explicitly blocks them from being redirect targets. They also reserve paths like /collections, /vendors, and /tools.
Yep, completely blocked.
But wait, why would Shopify block those? If I have a massive multi-million-dollar legacy marketing campaign pointing to an old /shop URL from my Salesforce days, you're telling me I just have to let it die in 404?
You do.
Wow.
You have to. Shopify reserves those specific paths for its own internal system routing and backend infrastructure. If you try to force a redirect rule over them, the system gets confused about whether the user is trying to reach a product page or the actual back-end checkout infrastructure.
That makes sense.
So to prevent catastrophic site errors, Shopify just rejects the rule entirely. If you try to include those paths in your massive spreadsheet of 301s, they will fail, and the customer will hit a dead link.
Which means Google drops that page's ranking equity immediately.
Immediately. You have to audit your legacy marketing links and update them at the source before launch day. And you really need to set realistic expectations with your executive stakeholders regarding SEO.
That's a tough conversation.
It is. But even with a bulletproof, perfectly executed 301 redirect map, you should expect short-term ranking fluctuations while Google physically crawls your new Shopify URL structure. That is completely typical during any enterprise replatform.
Okay, that's good to know.
But that 301 map is the anchor. It is the only thing that holds your search equity through that chaotic recrawling window.
So architecture is mapped, the data is secured, and the SEO safety net is in place. The final pieces of this massive puzzle are deciding how to physically build the new storefront and figuring out exactly when to pull the trigger on the cutover.
Yeah, the fun stuff. The guide outlines 3 distinct paths for the front-end build. First, you have native Liquid.
And what exactly does that entail for an enterprise team?
Well, Liquid is Shopify's native templating language. Building a native Liquid theme means you start with a robust, pre-built framework provided by Shopify and customize it to match your brand.
Sounds efficient.
It is the cheapest, fastest, and most heavily supported route. The guide strongly suggests this covers the vast majority of storefront needs and really should be the default choice unless you have a highly specific technical reason to avoid it.
But the guide also mentions going headless with Hydrogen. Hydrogen being Shopify's official React-based framework. Why would a brand choose that over Liquid if it's way more expensive?
Well, if your team is coming from SFCC's PWA kit or composable storefront, they are already accustomed to a headless architecture, meaning the front-end visual layer is completely decoupled from the back-end commerce engine.
Wow, okay.
They might demand to keep that total control over the front-end experience. Hydrogen allows for incredible custom performance, but it comes at a significantly higher initial build cost and requires dedicated, ongoing developer maintenance.
Got it. And the third option is bring your own stack.
Right. Using whatever custom front-end framework or hosting environment you want and simply tying it back into Shopify via APIs. It offers maximum flexibility, but also maximum technical debt. You own the middleware, you own the hosting, you own the security patches.
That sounds like a lot of work. So regardless of which build path your engineering team chooses, you have to time the actual migration correctly.
Yeah.
The guide introduces this concept it calls a forcing function.
Right, because a replatform is incredibly painful and disruptive.
Yeah.
You must anchor the project to a real business trigger.
Like what?
That could be a platform end-of-life announcement from Salesforce, a critical capability you are blocked on, or, honestly, most commonly, a contract renewal deadline. The guide emphasizes this heavily. Before you map a single data point, you must check your SFCC contract exit notice window. That legal time frame dictates your entire project calendar.
So what does this all mean for the bottom line? The source mentions that this process takes anywhere from weeks to several months. And if you're hiring an agency or a Plus partner to handle this rebuild, it's costing anywhere from $50 to $199 an hour, with total project costs easily scaling into the hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Oh yeah, easily.
How do enterprise brands justify this massive upfront pain and expense?
They justify it through the long-term ROI and a fundamental shift in how the platform bills them. Salesforce does not publish official Commerce Cloud pricing, but enterprise agencies note it is commonly tied to a percentage of your gross merchandise value, or GMV.
It's essentially a tax on your own growth. As you sell more products and become more successful, your platform costs scale up linearly.
Exactly. But Shopify operates on a predictable plan plus processing model. The guide actually pulls in a really striking quote from David Cost at Rainbow Shops to illustrate the difference here.
Oh, I remember this one.
He noted that after their migration, their platform fees became 80% less expensive than they were on Salesforce.
80%. I mean, when you are doing tens of millions in revenue, that is an incredible amount of capital freed up.
It's a massive reduction in operating expenses. And beyond the hard cost, he added that tasks that used to take multiple months and hundreds of thousands of dollars in agency fees to stand up on SFCC, they now take his internal team 15 minutes on Shopify.
15 minutes. That's insane.
The upfront pain of the rebuild pays for itself rapidly in both agility and reduced overhead.
Which brings us to the actual cutover playbook, the final launch sequence. How do you physically flip the switch from Salesforce to Shopify without losing orders that happened during the transition?
It requires a highly choreographed sequence. Let's say you plan to launch on a Monday. First, you implement a content freeze on the old SFCC site on Friday.
So no new products, no page updates.
Exactly. You run your massive data extraction over the weekend. Then, just before you switch the DNS,
Which is updating the internet's master phone book to point your URL to Shopify instead of Salesforce. Right?
exactly, right before you do that, you run what's called a delta import.
Delta import, catching the gap in time.
Yeah, because your main data dump took hours or days. The delta import is a small, fast script that catches only the new orders and new customer accounts that were created on the live SFCC site during that specific weekend gap.
Brilliant.
Once that delta data is safely verified in Shopify, you flip the DNS routing, run end-to-end test orders on the live production environment, and begin monitoring the new site.
Wow. Okay, let's step back and look at what we've unpacked today. If you're sitting in that boardroom mapping out your escape route from Salesforce Commerce Cloud, here is your core playbook. First, approach this as a fundamental rebuild of your business logic, not just a data transfer.
Yeah,
Embrace the fact that your proprietary cartridges and pipelines are gone.
very important.
Second, respect the platform limits. Know that you have an expanded 2048 variants to play with, but you will need a strategic launch day email to manage the friction of password resets.
Yep.
Third, protect your SEO with a meticulous 301 redirect map and audit those reserved URL paths. It is non-negotiable. And finally, anchor your entire timeline to your SFCC contract exit window. We really designed this deep dive to help you avoid the scrambles, the drop traffic, and the catastrophic outages that plague unprepared teams.
It really is all about approaching the complexity with a clear, realistic framework. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, there is a really interesting philosophical question hiding inside this highly technical execution guide.
What's that?
Well, the guide talks extensively about the pain of rebuilding all that custom business logic, right? Reauthoring the cartridges, replacing the SFRA controllers. It's consistently framed as the hardest part of the migration. But this raises an important question for enterprise leaders. What if this forced rebuild isn't actually a burden? What if it's a necessary audit?
Oh, like an audit of your own operational complexity.
Yes. Enterprise brands spend years, sometimes decades, layering highly customized, bespoke features onto their Salesforce architecture. But are those features actually driving revenue, or are they simply technical debt masquerading as innovation?
That's a great point.
Consider whether Shopify's rigid guardrails, like forcing you into fixed URL paths or capping variant structures or standardizing the checkout, might actually force your business to become more disciplined. In the end, losing the ability to infinitely customize your platform might just be the exact constraint your organization needs to become leaner, faster, and ultimately more profitable.
A forced cleanup of the revenue engine. It's a fantastic question to ask as you look at your own migration roadmap. Are you spending thousands of dollars to rebuild a legacy feature because it actually makes you money? Or just because it's what your team has always done? Definitely something to chew on as you start planning your move.